Okay, so we are here on page 157. There at the bottom of the page. Of course, today's a very special day. I have a special program for that. Rabbi Majeski will speak about the significance of this day, called Nissan, the historic day. So I won't go into it. I'll let him explain everything about it. So here we're in the Maimon is explaining what is ouch. Chesed shebechesed, Gemura shebechesed, Tefer shebechesed, and Netzach shebechesed, Hoyt shebechesed. What does it mean? To explain like this, the general idea is, and the same with all the spheres. This is just an example, but the same principle, the same formula would apply to all the spheres. So from here you get this idea. And of course, I mentioned to you to look at Rabbi Jacobson's book. You know where the Am is? Yeah, in the library. No. Okay, and in that book, he goes through every single day and tries to translate it into something practical that we can work on. That's very helpful. But the general principle is that chesed is the sphera. For example, in this context, when we're talking about chesed, is the feeling of love to another person. Chesed sheba chesed means that the love manifests itself in a loving way, which means a father who is embracing this child, giving this child a gift. Gevura sheba chesed means, again, it's love, but the love is being manifested in a gevuridic way, which is the example of someone who is threatening my child or threatening someone that I love, and therefore I'm distancing that person, I'm pushing that person away, I'm rejecting that person. So I'm doing something which is gevura, but it's coming from love. The fact that I love this person, that's why I'm rejecting the enemy of the person. So again, it's love manifesting in a gevura way. And what's the Ferris? The Ferris is when love manifests in an emotion, which is a combination of chesed and gevura, an emotion which is a balance and a blend of chesed and gevura. That's why it's called Teferis. And what's Netzach? So we explained yesterday, Netzach means the emotion, the feeling of perseverance, the feeling of determination. And that very often, from the point that I feel like doing something till it actually gets done, there are a lot of obstacles in the way, a lot of challenges in the way. And very often, people don't get to carry out whatever it was that was their decision to do or their feeling to do, because it gets more complicated. You know, someone who heard about what's going on in Israel and says, okay, I'm going there, I'm going to help families, I'm going to go out there. Okay, then what? Okay, then you have to call the airlines. They don't have any tickets. You have to find a way of getting getting the flight. You have to find money to get the flight, and you're busy with all these kind of things. Very often, you get so complicated with all the technical details that you just maybe I'll go there later, which means there has to be a certain feeling that this is what I want, and nothing's going to stop me. That's Netzach. And by the way, later in the Maimon, he'll explain how these meters apply to the Nefesh Elokis, how they apply to the Nefesh Bahamas, Nefesh Hativis. The principle is the same principle, it's just, is it in Kedusha or in the opposite, but the emotion are the same emotions. What is Hoid? So that's where we're up to. I think we mentioned it briefly yesterday. This is like 5 lines from the bottom. Hoid Shebechesed. I said yesterday, the Hoid is the same as Netzach, but it's on the other side of the coin. Netzach is the determination and perseverance when it comes to being proactive about doing something out of love. And Hoid is sort of the perseverance and the determination to carry out the Gevura, which means I have to hold back something. And he gives an example. For example, someone who out of love for his friend will put his life in danger, will risk his life to save his friend. So in other words, if a person, let's say a mother who loves her child, and chas v'shalom, the child is in danger, and she has to save the child from a fire, and she doesn't care, she's running into the fire to save the child. So basically, what she's doing is an act of gevura. Normally, a person has to care for their health, has to be careful, and she's not doing that. She's sort of not paying attention to the normal human desire that a person wants to be healthy and well. And what is she doing? She's running into a fire, but she's doing that out of love. It's coming because she loves her child. Actually, we can use the example in Chumash. It says that Avraham Avinu was the epitome of chesed. In other words, the chesed that he had was not only sort of the highest form of kindness and love that we can imagine, but it says that his chesed was pretty much like a replacement, almost like a substitute for chesed of Atzilus. There's a very strange quote, often brought down in Maimorim, from a Sefer Kabbalah, that chesed of Atzilus said to Hashem that during Avraham Avinu's lifetime, I didn't have to do my work. He did my work. Meaning to say, his attribute of kindness and love was so powerful that it could have been considered like a substitute for chesed of Atzilus. How could someone with so much love be ready to take a knife and take away the life of his only child, whom he loved so much? He loved every person. And therefore, he spent his whole life telling people about Hashem and helping people whichever way he can. All the stories we know with Avraham Avinu. So how could someone that had sort of infinite feelings of love for everyone, how much more so for his child, how much more so for a one and only child, how much more so for a one and only child that was born after waiting 100 years, it says in Chassidus, the only way that was possible was he had to completely hold back his feeling, his loves for Yitzchak, and just do what Hashem wanted. And why did he do what Hashem wanted? Also because of love, because of Hashem's love. He loved Hashem. And Hashem wanted him to do that, so he did it. But in order to do this, in other words, the basis here was love, not Gevura. It was love for Hashem. But in order to carry out that love for Hashem, he had to totally hold back and conceal and sort of, in some way, almost pretend that it doesn't exist, the love that he has for his child. So that's the part which is hoid, determined to not let those feelings of love get in the way, holding it back. So same here, a person who risks his life to save someone that's in danger. So risking your life is also an act of gevura, which means you're not allowing the feelings of wanting to be safe and wanting to be healthy get in the way of me running into the fire to save the child. That's why it's called gevura, but it's motivated by chesed. So again, chesed is the principal motivating attributes, and the other ones are how it manifests. The next one we didn't do yet is Yesod Shebechesed. And like I mentioned yesterday, even though the word Yesod means foundation, but it has infinite different details of what it really means and what it expresses. But literally, Yesod is a foundation. At least on a surface level, what's the connection between Yesod and an emotion? Again, a foundation is not an emotion. But it means that, I guess when you have a building, you have, I think would be the explanation, you have a building, and the building stands on the ground. If there wouldn't be a foundation, it would just stand on the ground. What would happen? It would collapse. So what really makes it stand strong is that you dig a hole in the ground, and the bottom part of the building is in the ground, and it's held by the ground, and now the building stands. So basically, the foundation is the point of bond between the building and the ground, so to speak. In Chassidus, it means that Yesod is the foundation, meaning the connecting point between the mashpia and the makabel. All these emotions, when you talk about emotion, remember we said emotion is always about how I feel towards something outside of myself. Then comes the point, after all the feelings, comes the point, okay, now it's actually time to do what needs to be done. In order to do what needs to be done, there has to be two things. Number one, Yisoid, and the second one is Malchus. Maybe I'll start with Malchus first, then go back to Yisoid. What is Malchus? He says, look at the last one, Malchus of Chesed. Generally speaking, Malchus is speech or action. What's the connection between speech and action and royalty? Let's put that on hold for a minute, and let's just focus on what it means here. So, for example, if a person has chesed, which started off, that's the midah of loving someone, it would mean when a person will express that verbally, in other words, speak to the person that they love, how much they love them, that's the feeling of love coming out on the outside and connecting to the other person. Or if I do an act, which is an act, a result, and an expression of my love for that child or the other person that I love. So Malchus is very different than all these spheres. What is the difference? All the attributes are what I feel within myself. Malchus is the point where now, whatever I feel, now comes the time to execute that feeling outside on the practical level. So therefore, having all these feelings that he's talking about, this is all what I'm experiencing internally. Then comes the point that now I'm going to actually do it, which is do something for that person. When he says, for example, to risk my life to save someone, it means I'm feeling determined to risk my life to save one. But when I actually run into the fire, that's the malchus. So again, all the emotions are about how I feel about another person. And is it a chesed feeling, is it a gvura feeling, and all the six emotions are all about how I feel. And when it comes to malchus, that's now executing the feeling practically to actually perform based on those feelings. That's what malchus is. So father was very proud of his child, that this child did something amazing and made the father so proud, and he decided he loves him so much, he wants to give him a gift and show him how much he appreciates what he did. There are all these feelings going on, and then when he actually buys the gift and gives him the gift, that's the malchus. That's the final stage of all the emotions. So we skipped over Yesod. So what is Yesod? The Yesod, he says, is the hiskashrus achazaka shala oyev ala ahu. That's the bond. That's the point where there's a bond and a connection between the one that loves and the one that's being loved. And the more connected you are, the more you will be in the mode of giving and expressing and executing that love practically in the practical level. Did you ever study any mimer that explained it so detailed before? No. Okay, so it's the first time, so it's hard to grasp. But we're going to go further. It's going to give more examples. Like I said, I'll give an example of how it's with the kids with Shabamis. Eventually, it'll become a little bit more clear. But it's a very important mimer because all you do in Chassidus is all over. It's all about Seichel, Midos. So it is important to get to know what are the other Midos. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Yesod, Malchus. Then he concludes the last line. Kol Sheva Hamidus Halalu, all these seven attributes, Mishlimus is Midas and Chesed. That makes Chesed complete, which means that once I have Chesed Sheba Chesed, the Gvura Sheba Chesed, the Feresh Shebechesed, Netzach Shebechesed, the Hoyt Shebechesed, the Seit Shebechesed, Malchus Shebechesed. Now the Chesed is complete. But let's say a person would have all the emotions, but at the end of the day doesn't act on it, doesn't perform, doesn't execute those feelings in Ma'aseh B'Peil, in actuality, then even though he has Chesed, but the Chesed never came to complete fruition because it didn't come out on the outside. So it has to go from Chesed all the way to Malchus to be complete. Let's turn the page. On top of the page is a kitzur, again, a summary of chapter 2. Kitzur. In this chapter, he explained, Sheha'omer hu misa'erim lachem yiboshem bo'esh. He's supposed to take sa'erim barley, which is still fresh, just cut them off, cut it off, it was taken off the field, and then you're supposed to dry it by holding it over the fire. And after that, he's supposed to take a small measurement, which is called isoren, and it's taken through a sift to make it more and more refined, 13 times over again and again, until it's extremely refined, and that's the carbon. After bringing the carbon on the second day of Pesach, comes the second thing, and that's the counting. And the counting extends over 49 days. And what is it called? Midah each week is to see that each midah would be complete. And then he goes over briefly. Chesed is the love. Chesed Sheba Chesed is Ava Gluya, revealed love. That the love manifests itself in a loving way. Gvura Sheba Chesed is Lisnei Es Haseinah Shel Eyavad, to hate the one that hates the one that you love. Let's make it easier to relate to, because you can't hate people. Klippa. I hate Tzaddik Gomer hates Klippa because he loves Hashem. You should remember that from Tanya chapter Yud. So the Tzaddik Gomer hates Klippa because of the love for Hashem. So that's love manifesting in Gevurah. Then we have the Feresh Shebechesed. And that means chesed and love in a balanced way. A chesed l'chazik ruchnius, that you're expressing love and you're giving and you're kind, and you're being generous, but it should be in a balanced way, not to the wrong people in the wrong place. So that's the balanced chesed. Netzach Sheba Chesed means determined to carry out that love. Not to be deterred and be disturbed or stopped by all the obstacles in the way. Hoyt Sheba Chesed is also lilchon leman hatzil ha'oyev, to fight in order to save the person that I love. So I'm fighting. That belongs to the Hoyt category, but I'm fighting because of my love, that I love this person and this person's in danger. Yesod Shebechesed is the iskashus in the ohev. Now this is the point where I'm getting ready to sort of execute that love and perform. So there has to be the connection between the one that loves and the one that's being loved. And then is Malchus Shebechesed, which is diburim shel cheva, words of love or actions of love, where I'm actually executing the emotion in actuality. Now let's continue. Called Hamidas, hey Midas B'nei Adam. All these Midas that we just described are Midas of a person. La'adam yesh seichel u'midas. A person has both intellect and emotion. Shebezehu sheini mibal hachayim, and that's what distinguishes a human being from an animal. Av shegam lebal hachayim yesh seichel u'midas. Animals also have some degree of intellect, And animals surely have emotion, but yeshnam shnei chilukim ben adam and behema. There are two differences between adam and behema, a human and an animal. One difference is Adam, the person, ikri seichel, he's primarily functions, at least he's supposed to function by intellect. And the midas, they're guided by the intellect. Balachayim is just the opposite. In ikra midas, animals are primarily emotion. This is what they want, or this is what they like, and this is what they hate. And here they're attacking, and here they're being attracted to something or someone. So it's all emotion. And the bit of intellect that you see there is something which follows the emotion, the other way around. That's one difference. Chiluk nois of a second difference is vein haseichel midas sheba'adam balachayim hu shaseichel v'amidas shebalachayim are active. The midas of an animal are natural; it's instincts. He was born that way. It's programmed to have to feel the way he feels. Aval eisel adam atem b'nei Yisrael. No. Gam haseichel v'amidas sheb'nei adam. By a person, also the midas are guided by seichel, but by Yidden, like it says, Adam Matam B'nei Yisrael HaSeichel v'midas einam rak sichlim elgam elikim. Not so. In other words, there's three levels. One level is where my emotions are natural, the instinct that would be like an animal. Then the second level is my emotions are guided by my seichel, that's human. And then there's the third thing, which is higher, it's guided by something godly seichel, godly intellect. And that's, it comes from the Nefesh Elokis. So basically, there are three teams here. The Nefesh Elokis, another nefesh which is called nefesh hasichlis, the intellectual soul, and the third team is the natural soul. Even though we always say, "Oh, there's two souls," now we're saying there's three souls. It's because generally speaking, there's really two. But the nefesh habahamis we sometimes divide into two parts. There's one part of the nefesh habahamis which is more or less just natural, almost like instinct. And in other words, like this, there are people that they function purely by midas. They're not intellectual people, they're not thinkers, and their life is all about emotion. Just fun and pleasure and anger and this I do want, this I don't want. That's what life is about. Then there are people, it has nothing to do with being a yid or being godly. They just have much more depth in their life. They're philosophers, they're artists. They have something where they're using their seichel and their talent to something more meaningful than just pleasure. Like an animal, for example, only knows pleasure, or the opposite of pleasure. And that's the only thing that motivates them. Humans are motivated by things that are higher than pleasure, things that have a certain purpose and a certain significance to it, and a certain depth to it. But it's not necessarily godly. And Shalakis is a godliness. So what he's saying here is, this is the way it's supposed to work. The seichel and midas elokim, the godly seichel and midas of the godly soul, have the strength to be mashpia on the natural soul through the intellectual soul. Not so complicated. Basically saying the intellectual soul is the mediator, the in-between the godly soul and the animal soul. There's a part of it which is pure animalistic. Again, only motivated by emotion. I do what I like, and I do what I have pleasure, and I don't do what I don't like, and it's all pleasure, self-gratification. That's all that I'm thinking about. There's another part of me that thinks, and has seichel and logic, and has depth. So in a sense, the godly soul explains what's right and what's wrong and what's truth and what's not truth to the intellectual soul. And then the intellectual soul has influence on the pure animal soul. The gap between the godly soul and the animal soul is so big that when the godly soul would speak to the animal soul would know what he's talking about. So the godly soul speaks to the intellectual soul, and the intellectual soul speaks to the animal soul. Yeah.
From this, it seems like that's where our free will is in the intellectual soul.
Yes. That's where it comes to. That's the one who makes the decision. Yeah. Again, it doesn't mean that we have this split personality or triple personality. It's all happening as if it's all one, but this is really what's going on. Which means, let's say a person learns a Maimar Chassidus. When you learn a Maimar Chassidus, this is godly intellect. It's something which was revealed in this world through a Rebbe, and it's something which is spiritual and godly. And the fact that I can understand it and grasp it and even be excited about it is because of my godly soul. And now, I remember we learned many times in the mind, we would try to understand it in a way that my animal soul could relate to it, but it's still intellect and logic. I'm thinking about it in an intellectual way, in a philosophical way. So even that part of me which is not godly, just intellectual, could relate to it. And then eventually, this message is transmitted to the part of me which is pure animalistic to change the way it conducts itself.
Change what?
The way it conducts itself. In other words, from the animal, the part of me which is pure animalistic and instinct, I'll go after any food, makes no difference if it's kosher and not kosher, healthy, not healthy, it makes no difference. I just do what I want and what gives me pleasure. That's all that counts. So it's the intellectual soul that's the part of me that explains even to the part of me which is just instinct. No, it doesn't make sense. Eat only those foods which are healthy for you physically and healthy for you spiritually, because Hashem created the world. But in order for that process to happen, this is the way it journeys from the godly soul to the intellectual soul to the animal soul. So the intellectual soul and the animal soul are both the same. They both belong to the Nefesh Bahamas. But the godly soul, the intellectual soul, is sort of a higher, more upgraded part of the Nefesh Bahamas. It's the part of the Nefesh Bahamas that has intellect and has more depth to it. The other part of the Nefesh Bahamas is pure animalistic and like functions by instinct. So now he's going to explain chesed shebechesed, gvura shebechesed, and all that, how it manifests with the animal soul. It's going to be a bit scary, but it'll help us understand how animals are. Because he does describe things very extreme. I think why describing it extreme also, you have to remember when this was said. This mimer was said in 1940, was written in 1940, and this was the time where there were unfortunately hundreds of Jewish kids that formed as a group called the Obsetsia in Russia, which means that they were out to destroy and undermine anything related to Torah, to mitzvahs, to Yiddishkeit. Wild kids, the kids in their 20s, they're the ones who wanted to arrest the Frierdiker Rebbe. They're the ones who are unfortunately executed. I'm using the word executed different now. Unfortunately killed and murdered Yidden who are Rabbanim and Shoftim and Rosh Hashivas. Anyone that dealt with spreading Yiddishkeit, they murdered them. And who are these? These were Jewish kids who grew up in Jewish homes. Some of them even in frum homes. So obviously the Rebbe Shabbat took over to the point of forming so low. So it goes like this: Chesed is ava gufnis and yani elam, physical love to all worldly things, means just worldly pleasures. What's chesed? Sheva chesed is hislavus hatuv tam, is that passion that a person has, Rahman al-Islam, for the physical pleasure. This is one, everybody is human, so we have pleasure from physical pleasures. But we're talking about passion. The person who's passionate about it. And Slavus actually, in a sense, means like he's on fire with passion for physical pleasure. The tide is gufnius, v'anochas ha'olam, And how does it manifest in pursuing all those physical pleasures? So that's love of the Nefesh Bahamis for animalistic things, and it's manifesting itself in a loving way. What's Gvura Shebechesed? Hasina, the hate, the Shema Torah mitzvahs that they had, the people that observed Torah mitzvahs, which is hard to imagine, but that's the way it was. These are people who had a literally hate for someone who observed Torah mitzvahs. I mean, in order to murder someone, you have to have hate. So here it's manifesting in a way that observing Torah mitzvahs, but what's motivating them? Their love for all the physical passions and pleasures. And therefore they want to they hate anything that's challenging the way they live. That's really what it's about. Tiferes Shebechesed. So here he's translating the word Tiferes. Remember we said that each one of these words have many definitions. One of them, Tiferes, also comes from another word in Hebrew, Hitpaer, which means to boast. Is Hillel Rasha al Taivas Nafshe. There's a pasuk in Tehillim that says with the Rasha, the wicked person boasts about their Taivas. In other words, and we see this Baruch Hashem in our wonderful Geishmistic world today, that not only the people that have all sort of sick Taivas, but they actually boast and they publicize to the whole world, I have this Taiva and I have that Taiva, and I'm attracted to these things physically. And that's, of course, something which is motivates a person to do even more. But the origin of it is the passion for physical pleasure. Netzach Shebechesed, meaning again the determination. Not only this person is on fire with love for the gashmis and the physical and the material, but he's on fire and he's so determined that nothing is going to stop him. For example, someone who's chayto machtis harabim. Not only he does averis, he's trying to force everybody else to do averis. It keeps us and does it with einan nisim apnei shum davar. Nothing is going to stop him. Hoyche b'chesed. In this case, chesed means love and passion for physical, materialistic pleasure. What is hoitche b'chesed? Yedeyes Rebbeinu mechaven limrbe. The Gemara says this in reference to a few people, but one of them that's mostly known is Amalek, that he knows his creator and he intentionally wants to rebel against him. If you remember, we learned in Mamar, this was Purim time, where he explains how Amalek is different than all other klippas that we know. All other klippas, their sort of their goal is not going against Hashem. Their goal is pleasure. So they're so immersed in their and so passionate about the things that they want that they don't care no matter what. So Shabbat doesn't matter, that kosher doesn't matter. Is gonna someone tells you that this is gonna bring the opposite of a reward, and this will bring, God forbid, all sorts of negative results. Nothing matters. I have to get but the driving force is passion, pleasure. In the case of Yidei Sebei Mechamed Lirbe, it means the driving force is denying Hashem. That's the driving force. And he says that is Hoitche B'Chesed. Who Esed Dvarim Apekursium. He does things which go against Torah, and he violates so many things in Torah. Not only like a person who violates Torah out of pleasure, even in halacha, it has different status. Besides the fact that he has no limits, there's nothing that's stopping him, and he just pursue any physical pleasure that he hears about. He denies Torah and he goes against Torah intentionally just to anger Hashem. you might have heard this story, but it's a famous story with the Ramban. That the Ramban had a student. And again, the Ramban was probably the greatest tzaddik in his generation. That would be like, the Rebbe in our generation, that was the Ramban. And you can imagine that his close students were also no ordinary people. One of his students distanced himself from the Ramban and no longer went to study with him. And not only he distanced himself, but he got closer to the non-Jews. And that he got closer, eventually he converted, whatever religion was there, probably Islam or maybe Christianity. And not only that, but then he was very successful in what he did, successful with a lot of money and power. And he reached a point where he had a very high position of power. And he lived in the same city with the Ramban. Anyone heard the story? It was Yom Kippur, and he ordered his soldiers to bring the Ramban to him in chains on Yom Kippur. And in front of him, he took a knife, and he slaughtered a pig, and he cooked it, and he ate it. And he told the Ramban, you see, I just violated 5 different things in Torah, and for each one, there's the death penalty. Ate on Yom Kippur, and he cooked on Yom Kippur, and whatever. He started to argue about it. The Ramban said it was 4 things. He said, no, there were 5. They were arguing about the halacha. Then the Ramban looked at him and said, tell me, what caused you to go so far away? I mean, the reason why I'm telling you the story to bring out the point, if he wants to eat something for pleasure is one thing, but to bring the Ramban, to watch him violate 5 things on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. And he knew what it means for Ramban. That's what he's describing here. His hate and his opposition to Torah mitzvahs was so severe to the point that he does it specifically to anger Hashem or to anger tzaddikim. That's his pleasure. Otherwise, why would someone do something so crazy like this? But let me tell you, the end of the story was, Ramban asked him, what caused you to go so far away? So he said, you're the cause. Me? What did I do? He said, you gave a class, and you said that in the Parshas Hazinu, which is a small parsha of the Torah, every single person's name was found in that parsha. And that's impossible. So therefore, I came to the conclusion that nothing is true, and goodbye. The Ramban says, I still maintain that it's true, and you made a mistake. So he says, if it's true, show me where is my name. The Ramban said, give me a moment. He turned around, he faced the wall for a moment, and he turned around, and he showed him which pasuk had that every 3rd letter in these words spells his name. His name was Avner. And here's another point in the story. Somebody who felt so low, when he saw that, he said, is it possible for me to do tshuva? And he said, yes. How can I do tshuva? He said, that's also in the pasuk. And he read what it says further. You should go to a place that no one knows you. And he told him he should leave his palace, wherever he was, and he should go to a place where nobody knows him, and that's where he should do his tshuva. And that's what happened. In fact, the interesting thing was, his name was Avner, so he showed him the few words. One word, the 3rd letter was an aleph. The other word, the 3rd letter was a beis. The next one, the 3rd letter was a nun. And the next one, the 3rd letter was a resh. But another thing is that the 1st letter was a resh, which is Reb. Reb is a title you give to a person of importance, not to a person who's a Rasha, which means it's already hinted in the Torah that he will do tshuva, or that he has the potential to tshuva. But here we see that when people say, nah, I don't think these people really can get involved in Judaism. If someone like that can turn around because they saw the emes, anybody can turn around. And that's that part of the story. But that's called Mamar Usefartem, somebody who goes against Torah specifically to anger Hashem, not just because of their pleasure. Yisod Shebechesed, remember you said Yisod means the bond. In this case, it means that he's so on fire to his physical, materialistic pleasure that he becomes bound to it, that he can't. It's almost like a person who is who is on drugs or addicted in one way or another, that they just can't let go. Those are clinically addicted, and then there's emotionally addicted that I can't let go. That's how bound. That's how he bound with klipa, with his pleasures, to the extent that Huretzeach will even go as far as murdering someone in order to pursue the things that are his passions. And Shum Sakana. I'm pretty sure the preacher was describing those people in that time in Russia that were literally living this way. Because at the end of the day, just want to tell you that this group of Jews who were called Yevsektia, which they made more problems for Torah mitzvahs than the communists, it only lasted for 20 years. Came a certain point where the communists hated them as well, and they were all executed. And they thought, we're going to be friends, we're going to help you, we're going to do things for against the Jews even better than you. At the end, the communists remained communists, and the Goyim remained anti-Semites, and they even killed these Jews who were so far from Judaism. So they put their life in danger in order to pursue their tigers. And then comes Malchus. That's a whole big paragraph. We'll maybe leave it for next time. Actually, I could conclude it because probably Uzma is not working in a second. Malchus Shebechesed. We said that's when you actually execute all these emotions. Malchus Shebechesed is Ribui Diburim Asurim. Just like we said before, Malchus is speaking words of love. This is the opposite. Speaking words which are prohibited, words which are heresy against Hashem, against Torah, against mitzvahs, like people who are laughing and ridiculing Torah and mitzvahs. People who publish articles and write things in the newspapers and publicize their ideas that go against Torah mitzvahs to discourage others. And in general, all their actions which are wild, Taseris and Matzerim, totally no holding back. Shel HaKefrim v'HaPeikrim, for all these people that are heretics and go against Torah and against Hashem, they make the world a much more coarse place, which is the exact opposite of why Hashem created the world. Hashem created the world that we should learn Torah and do mitzvahs in order to refine the world, and they're doing the opposite, and that's the malchus of all these mitzvahs that he just described. What he just described now was the 7 midas of the Nefesh HaBahamis. Then he's going to do the 7 midas of the Nefesh HaTivis. Then he's going to do the 7 midas of the Nefesh HaLekis. Okay, we'll stop here. There's probably other girls come from the other level have to join us, or this is the whole place? Yeah, come. Oh, wait a minute. So I prepared 2 options. I think you didn't learn these sequels before. If you tell me you learned both of them before, I'm in trouble. But don't say. Did Rabbi Greenberg, the only one that would have taught you the Sikh would be Rabbi Greenberg. Tashas Noach, you remember when that was? That was a long time ago. He must have taught Parshas Noach. Do you remember if he taught you the Sikh about